The Extraordinary Adventures of Mr. Benn by David McKee, read by Simon Flynn. Big Top. The sound of children laughing made Mr. Benn look out of his window in Festive Road. He soon saw the cause of the laughter. Young Julian was wearing a mask and amusing his friends. What a lovely sound, thought Mr. Benn. It must be fun to dress up and make people laugh. With that he remembered a costume shop that he knew, a special costume shop that adventures could start from. There must be an outfit to make me look funny, he thought. He put on his hat and coat and set out for the shop. As he walked, Mr. Benn remembered adventures he'd had from the little shop. He reached the door and went in. When he saw the costumes again, he almost decided to try something exciting instead of funny. But before he did, as if by magic, the shopkeeper appeared. "Good morning, sir," he said. "What would you like to try today?" "Well," said Mr. Benn, "I rather thought I'd like to make people laugh." The shopkeeper smiled and showed Mr. Benn a baggy suit with a bow tie. "See if it fits, sir," said the shopkeeper. And as Mr. Benn took the suit towards the changing room, he added, "This goes with it." And he handed him a red false nose. In the changing room, Mr. Benn put on his clothes. The suit was too big, the shoes were huge, but when he put on the false nose and looked in the mirror, he burst out laughing. "Perfect," he said, and walked to the door. Not the one to the shop, but the one marked Trying Room. I'll come out into a circus," he thought. He was wrong. He came out into open countryside. Nearby was a car, obviously intended for Mr. Benn. It could only be a clown's car. Mr. Benn jumped in it and set off down the road. At first, it was just a pleasant countryside drive. But Mr. Benn approached a bend in the road and the car started to behave oddly. It bounced and banged and steamed and squeaked and wriggled and rattled and behaved like, well, a clown's car. At the same time, he came to a line of circus vehicles packed along the road. There was just room to pass. At the front of the trucks stood the circus people with their backs to Mr. Benn. As he approached, they turned. He stopped the car, jumped out and tripped over. Everybody laughed. "Welcome," they said. "We can always use another clown." "Could," said a voice. "Could use another clown if we could reach the next place for a show." Then Mr. Benn noticed that the road was blocked by boulders that had fallen down in a storm. "They're too big to move," sighed the ringmaster, "and we can't turn the trucks in this narrow road." "I can turn," said Mr. Benn. "I'll see what help I can get," and he drove back off down the road. Mr. Benn hardly left the circus when he saw a man walking over a nearby hill. "Perhaps he knows where I can get some help," thought Mr. Benn, and drove towards him. As he came closer, Mr. Benn could see that it was a very large man in a striped outfit. Mr. Benn recognised the man. It was Smasher LeGroux, a convict he'd met in a previous adventure from the costume shop. "Smasher!" shouted Mr. Benn in delight, and held out his hand. Smasher stared. He didn't recognise Mr. Benn in his clown's clothes. Mr. Benn lifted off the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Benn," said Smasher. This is a surprise. He explained that he'd been let out of prison and was off to find an honest job. Mr. Benn laughed. He remembered that Smasher got his name from smashing rocks in prison. "I've got a job for you," he said, and told Smasher about the circus. The circus people were disappointed to see Mr. Benn return with just one man, but when Smasher set to work with a sledgehammer, they gasped. As Smasher smashed, the circus people cleared the small pieces of stone out of the way. "If you want a job, you can come with us," said the ringmaster. "You can be the strong man." Smasher was happy. Once the way was clear, the people started to cheer, but the cheers turned to groans. The road should have passed over a bridge, but the storm had destroyed that as well. They were faced with a huge gap. "Don't worry," said Smasher. "I'll fill the gap with the boulders." "That's no good," said Mr. Benn. "You'd stop the river flowing." Then everyone started to speak at once. The man who did tricks on stilts suggested making stilts for everybody. The tightrope walker wanted a rope across them so as they could walk across the bridge. The balancing act wanted to balance pieces across the gap. Mr. Benn stopped them. "You are all thinking of ways that would get yourselves across," he said, "but that's not enough. Think of elephants on stilts or trucks on tightropes. Even if we did manage to get everything across, what about the others who want to use this road? No, the circus works as a team, and as a team we must build a bridge. Firstly, we need wood to build with. Come on, there are plenty of trees back along the road." When enough trees were cut, they started to build the bridge. "We'll make it on this side and slide it across," Mr. Benn said. The ringmaster was worried. "When we push the bridge across, it will fall into the river," he said. The balancing lady spoke up. "Make it longer than we need. The extra will stop it overbalancing. I'll watch it doesn't tip." They started to make the bridge. As soon as they made a part, they pushed a little over the edge. Then they built more onto it and pushed it a bit further. The more there was overhanging, the more there was on the side. The piece of bridge on the road was always the longer. "It would be useful to have some help on the other side to guide the bridge," said Mr. Benn. The cowboy who did rope tricks lassoed a rock across the gap. The tightrope walker and trapeze artist soon crossed. The stilt man put on his longest stilts and stood in the river to help guide the bridge. They cut and carried, built and pushed, balanced and guided, lifted and pulled, until eventually the bridge closed the gap. Now they really did cheer. The circus procession crossed the bridge and made their way to the next town. In the town, the hard work started once again as everyone set to put up the big top, the circus tent. At last, everything was ready for the show to begin. The circus started with the parade of all the stars and animals. After the parade, the individual acts started. When it was Smasher's turn, he was very popular. He was so strong. Mr. Benn was glad that he'd found a job to suit him. Then there was a magic act. Mr. Benn thought he knew the magician, but he couldn't remember seeing him at the bridge. He was very good. He made things change shape or move from one place to another, or just suddenly appear. Then the magician said, "I will now make a real live person vanish. Can I have a volunteer, please?" Me, shouted Mr. Benn, and drove into the ring. The car was doing its funny tricks. It took ages for Mr. Benn to reach the magician, and how the crowd laughed. "Step into this box, please, sir," said the magician. Mr. Benn stepped into the brightly painted box. Inside the box, he was back in the changing room. He put on his own clothes and went into the shop. There stood the smiling shopkeeper. "Did you enjoy yourself, sir?" he asked. Yes, thank you, said Mr. Benn, but there was a lot of hard work as well as laughs. Then he added, You're a very good magician. We can all do something, sir, said the shopkeeper. Mr. Benn was just about to leave when he realised he still had on the red nose. You can keep it as a souvenir if you like, sir, said the shopkeeper. Thank you, said Mr. Benn as he waved goodbye. It will remind me not to wait too long before I come and see you again.